Hi, my name is Kara Hudson, and I thought June would be a fantastic month to openly talk about religious trauma. I'm the author of the book, Who Am I? A Deep Dive Through Spiritual Wounding to Identity by Kara Hudson, LCPC. And I wanted to talk about religious trauma because any form of trauma has the exact same body responses for everybody who's experienced trauma. So as a therapist, I'd like to explore exactly what the criteria is to have PTSD from church. Criterion A, a stressor. The person is exposed to threatened death, actual or threatened serious injury, or actual or threatened sexual violence through direct exposure, witnessing the trauma, learning that a loved one was exposed to a trauma, and or indirect exposure to aversive details of the trauma. So let's talk frankly. Many people in my life who said the Jesus prayer did so because they wanted to avoid eternal torture and burning alive in hell. To a child, this image is traumatizing. It is absolutely terrifying. When this Greek thought became prominent in the 2nd century, which is when a lot of the New Testament was written, it became a very effective persuasive technique to get followers of each religion that espoused their view of Hades to get them to do what they wanted them to do. This trauma has been normalized, but is a real cause of distress that leads religions to coerce vulnerable people to comply with those requirements, whatever they may be. This can cause great anxiety for followers of these religions the whole time they're in the religion because of the constant fear of not meeting requirements and the potential of hell. It also gives the leaders some coercive power. Many others, as mentioned before, experience an existential threat because they are attracted to persons of the same gender, or because their brain doesn't match the gender of their gonads. A person cannot change those biological facts to match their belief system. And many homeless teens in great big cities around the country experienced great trauma at being ousted from their families, their churches, and their communities because they couldn't fit the expectations of their churches. And they didn't choose this. There are pastors and their families who experienced and or witnessed the suffering of their own children or individuals for these reasons. And when these pastors supported them, the pastors were given the exact same treatment by their families, churches, and communities. So there are children of religious leaders who grew up under other systems of abuse in the name of God, and they could no longer feel safe in their homes, churches, and communities. So criterion B is intrusion symptoms. This is when the traumatic event is persistently re-experienced in the form of unwanted, upsetting memories, nightmares, flashbacks, emotional distress after exposure to traumatic reminders, physical reactivity, that's that sympathetic nervous system response after exposure to traumatic reminders. Merely driving past a church after religious trauma can increase a person's heart rate, cause them to go into that sympathetic nervous system. Individuals may see church members or rejecting family members at the store, at the restaurant, and become very isolated in their communities because it's just too hard to re-experience that over and over and over again. And so criterion C is avoidance. Avoidance of trauma-related stimuli after the trauma in the form of thoughts, feelings, or external reminders of the trauma. The individual may seek comfort in addictive behaviors. There's pornography, sex, video games, social media, alcohol, substances of all kinds, weed, drugs. If this important sign of distress occurs, it is met with greater judgment by the community that caused the trauma in the first place. Criterion D, negative alterations in cognitions and mood. So this is when your negative thoughts or feelings that began or worsened after the trauma continue, and they kind of can morph and develop into a much bigger situation. So we're talking about inability to recall key features of the trauma, so your memory starts to go. Overly negative thoughts and assumptions about yourself in the world. Exaggerated blame of yourself or others for causing the trauma. Negative affect. Decreased interest in activities, and we got some depression going on here. Feeling isolated because you are completely alone. You've lost your support system. Difficulty experiencing positive affect. All the wind is let out of your sails. This is when it becomes even more dangerous. The individual has lost their sense of self apart from the rejecting community. Sometimes that's all they had. That's all we had. Cognitive dissonance, or when your mind, emotions, body, and spirit are not in agreement can become dangerous. And you may blame yourself for the rejection and may shut down physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. Many must be psychiatrically hospitalized or actually commit suicide. Criterion E, alterations in arousal and reactivity. So this is what it means. Trauma-related arousal or reactivity that began or worsened after the trauma in the following ways. Irritability or aggression, risky or destructive behavior, you just don't care anymore. Hypervigilance, always terrified of what's going to happen. Heightened startle reaction, difficulty concentrating, difficulty sleeping. The religiously traumatized individual struggles to function. They can be reactive to others who cause them harm. They are on alert at all times. They do not feel safe. They fear others. They fear what others will say or do to them this time. Criterion F is duration. So symptoms last for more than a month. So these are like situations that stay in your being. So think about when a pastor gets voted out of a church. He or she loses their job, their community, their home. They are homeless and jobless. They have lost all their supports. All that they know to do is gone. This experience only has to happen to them once for them and their families to have a trauma and have a memorable experience. And their children in these families remember these experiences for the rest of their lives, and it directly impacts their relationship with religious bodies after that. When an individual recognizes they are queer and are open about it, they can lose their families, friends, churches, and communities, and that is a primal wound. That losing everybody in your life is a primal wound. It will never be forgotten. Criterion C, functional significance. Symptoms create distress or functional impairment. So these are there are folks everywhere who have been so severely traumatized by their religious experiences, whether through the theologies, the communities, the churches, or the family practices, that they can no longer function in any religious setting of any kind and struggle in any social experience. So now there are two dissociative specifications in the DSM-5 for post-traumatic stress, and these are notable. These are a big deal. Number one is depersonalization. So this is when you feel disconnected from your body. It's almost like an out-of-body experience. And you also feel that very disconnect from relationships, that you just can't attach or form bonds anymore because it's just too terrifying to do. So your body just essentially shut down and says, no, I'm not willing to do that anymore. And you have no say-so about that. That's serious. And the other one in extreme cases, derealization. And this is when a person can no longer tell what is real. Their mind just cannot integrate that horrific experience into their being, so their mind just kind of gives out, and it is a tragic situation. That happens. That really happens. So I want you to recognize that religious trauma is a primal wound. We are taught from infancy that religious communities become our families. And when we are rejected by them, when we are dead to them, we must find a way to survive without that support. We must start over. And I want you to know that this is for you. Those of you who have had religious trauma in your lives, this book is for you. I want you to know that you were in my heart and on my mind every page that I wrote in this book. I hope it is helpful for you as you deconstruct your harmful theologies and rebuild a healthier sense of self, maybe for the first time. So who are you? You are precious. I'm so glad you're on the planet at the same time as I am. You are here for a reason, and you're supposed to be here. So let's help you start over. So for other videos discussing other topics in my book, I don't read to you my book, but I will discuss topics that are mentioned in my book at different times. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel, author Kara Hudson. My books can be found on Amazon Books, Barnes & Noble, Google Books. It's available in Kindle, paperback, hardback, and pretty soon it will be available as an audiobook as well. I'm passionate about helping those who are impacted by religious trauma to find healing. I'm so glad that you're here. Thank you for your time, and I'll see you soon.